going, yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. All right, so ready?
Yeah.
Down to the crossroads, fell down on my knees. Went down to the crossroads, fell down on my knees. Hey, everybody out there in Radio Land. Welcome to WHUS Stores. I am the Reverend Brian Blair here on Crossroads, the show where we ask our guest each time, what is the intersection of your everyday life and your faith life? And today I have two phenomenal guests. We've got Hollis and Carlita Cotton. Hello to you two.
Hello there.
Hello. All right, the mics are on, everything's working. We haven't been here for a year, and I was not even sure if this was going to work. So I'm very glad that it's actually working, and I'm very glad that you guys are both here. We have been gone because of COVID, and I'm very glad that we're back together. We're in the studio wearing masks, safe and sound, doing our thing. How about we get right to it? Just let me make one adjustment here. All right, now, so the big question, of course, is how does one's faith life intersect with one's everyday life? And so the question has to be, what do you do in your everyday life? How about we start with Carlita. Carlita, what do you do in your everyday life?
I like to wake up in the morning at 7 a.m. and by 7:14 a.m. I'm on a virtual prayer call in which it's only 15 minutes, but that helps me to get centered. I've learned in my life that the practice of having a daily office, of giving God, for instance, the first fruits of the day, and giving that attention sets the tone for the rest of my day. And so I'm very committed to taking 15 to 20 minutes to slow it down and spend some time in contemplation and prayer.
So you begin your day with prayer, but what do you do for a living?
That's a totally different matter. I am a professor of psychology as well as ordained clergy in the African Methodist Episcopal Church. So I'm wearing a couple of hats, shall we say.
So can you tell us a little bit about what you do as a psychology professor?
I enjoy now teaching exclusively online for two different universities. I teach predominantly third and fourth year undergraduate students. So they're normally psychology majors or education majors. And I'm preparing student teachers and student counselors that will be going out into the field and teaching our children in the state of Connecticut for the most part. And I really draw a lot of energy from them because they are adult learners, excited about working with young people, but I bring in the multiculturalism to the conversation and challenge microaggressions and how we identify from a strengths-based instead of deficit-based way with students. So how we identify their gifts and talents, how we accommodate for them, looking at the total student instead of maybe a behavioral issue that may be off-putting and take a child out of the equation, so to speak.
Where do you teach?
I teach at Post University and at Charter Oak State College.
All right. We're also here with all right, well, you know what, though? You did talk about having a prayer practice, but if I can go a little bit deeper for the audience here, how would you describe your faith practice? Some people might say Christian, Jewish, if you're a certain type.
I am Christian, but a strong Christian. However, I'm not myopic. And sometimes I call myself almost a seeker because I'm open and receptive to the tenets and teachings of other faith groups. Buddhist, Hindu. I do my yoga. You know, I'm very eclectic.
Are you part of a type of church right now as a Christian?
Yes, I do attend an African Methodist Episcopal church, which was where I was ordained in the AME church.
All right. So for shorthand, you're an AME Christian who teaches psychology.
Exactly.
All right. Hollis, it's nice to have you. How about we turn to you with the same question? What do you do with your time for a living? And then if afterwards you want to talk about yourself as a person of faith.
Well, most of my living is in counseling. The majority of my time is spent in counseling men all over the East Coast and all over the world by phone and by Zoom and so forth. I think that the COVID-19 pandemic really accelerated the global aspects of my ministry. In my work with men who call with various concerns or want to have time with various concerns, I deal with different time zones. And so my men's ministry is not subject to a particular location, and that's really how I spend the majority of my time in terms of ministry. In terms of professional, ministry was really the transition in my life. Previous to that, I helped to craft part of the Americans with Disabilities Act, and was active in politics for some 20 years in the Boston area. And after marriage, I'm now creating a new life, or co-creating.
So you use the term ministry, and for the audience out there, if they're not religious, that's a very particular type of term. So when you say counseling, you're not a therapist necessarily. This is something that you do as a part of are you an ordained minister?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I am ordained clergy. It is not these are ministerial consultations where individuals call me with certain concerns that they may have, and I try to bring a spiritual slant to what's going on with them. Usually it's Christian based. Usually we have a situation where the individual knows that I am clergy and is calling me for some sort of spiritual solution to his concern.
So then, just to define this for our audience, you're an ordained minister, and what you spend most of your time doing is counseling mostly men.
Mm-hmm.
And but you didn't start off as an ordained minister. You talk about doing, what would I call that, advocacy?
I come from a family of multi-generational social justice advocacy going back to the 1940s, and then moving on up into the civil rights movement and forward. And so for me, it was kind of in the water, so to speak, in the DNA. And so my first position was my first professional position was in terms of advocacy for the disability rights movement. And that was in the crafting of the Americans with Disabilities Act in 1990.
What made you want to spend your time working on something like the ADA?
Well, at the time, coming out of college after a battle of discrimination in the college area and in whether or not I was going to college, I graduated from the University of Massachusetts at Amherst, and that was really, in terms of advocacy, that was the position to go into, was the crafting of federal law to make the lives of people in my community at the time easier, so to speak. just in terms of movement, not in terms of physical movement, not even in terms of spiritual progression at the time. It was things as simple as, can this individual safely take a bus to work or a train or something like that? And so after several years of advocacy in that domain, I came to Christ in year 30 of my life, and that was, as it usually is, when Jesus enters our lives, there are changes. And so I moved towards ministry.
So would you say that, well, two things. First of all, you use the phrase my community, which, we're on the radio.
Mm-hmm.
You and I are in the studio together. For our audience out there, what do you mean when you say my community?
Well, when I say it in that context, I mean the community of folks who would consider ourselves differently able.
And would that be you? You consider yourself differently able?
Yes.
Okay. And you say, though, in the context of that whole description of your life, that were you raised as a Christian, and then you had a very particular moment where, as Christians sometimes say, you gave your heart over to Christ? Or were you not raised in any religion at all, and then by the time you were 30, you found the church?
I would say that I was exposed to Christianity, but I would not say I was raised in that particular tenet. I was raised in a situation which was openly tolerant of all people and all faiths, and that in and of itself allowed me to make choices. And at the time, I was having a, shall we say, watershed moment, and my boss told me, either you go to church on Sunday or I fire you on Monday.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that's how that happened.
Interesting.
And I did. I went to so I went to church, and I had to prove to her that I went to church.
Oh, wow.
And as a result, I was able to keep my job.
So you proved to her that you went to church by taking the collection money and coming back and being like, look at what I found at church. No? That's not how it
that's
works?
not what happened.
All right.
I kept the bulletin.
All right, good enough. I'm glad that you gave us kind of a description of how you got to where you are today. It's kind of a path with a variety of things that happen. I'm wondering, Carlita, also, we know each other from before 5 minutes ago when the show started. I know that you also have a path that has led you to where you are today. Do you want to tell us a bit about where you've gone in your life and how you've gotten to where you are today?
I think my life has come full circle. I actually started out raised in the African Methodist Episcopal Church. In fact, it was St. John AME Church in Birmingham, Alabama. And so baptized as a baby. And in fact, at age 3, we had an incident in which the church that was kitty corner, as we say in the South, or a block away from our church, the 16th Street Baptist Church, was bombed. And obviously that changed the trajectory of worship in our community. But tangentially, my mother, who at the time was our church's organist, was also the organist or the minister of music for the funerals of those girls who perished in the Birmingham bombing. And so I was always raised in the church, enjoyed time in the church, Sunday school. That was my support network, my friends. And then when I became, once I went off to college, I stopped attending church, and then, of all things, went into the United States Air Force. Had a really good time for about 10 years, but somewhere I read in the Bible, that if you train a child up in a certain way, in other words, in the Christian doctrine, when they get older, they will return back to it. And so that's what ended up happening with me about halfway through my military career. I can honestly say I began to be conflicted by the mission, overarching mission of an armed forces, and the mission of people in a faith group, non-combatant, right? Conscientious objectors, so to speak. So here I was, active duty, now having an attack of conscience. Not quite the time to get that attack. But I got involved with the chapels on different military bases where I was stationed. So there was a way to continue to pursue your faith and still be active duty and do your job and do it well.
Well, can I, you do not have to answer this, but, you know, you kind of raise it in the whole issue around you having this conflict of conscience. Did you ever resolve it? Some people would classify themselves as a pacifist. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, well, I do remember at the 10-year mark saying, Lord, one night, I need help. I feel like I'm at a crossroads. And I was set, but then I had gone back to school, gotten my bachelor's and whatnot, and I was all set to go to law school. I had done the LSATs, I was ready. I was going to be the next, maybe female version of Perry Mason. That's where I was headed with it. I know I'm dating myself. And yet, I went on a retreat, a Christian retreat with the ladies from the Fort Meade Chapel in Maryland. And I guess it was kind of like an epiphany. I had a moment of clarity in which I became very introspective. And when the whole retreat, I'm glossing over it, but when the whole retreat finished, I came back home to Maryland and announced to everyone who loved me, yes, you know, I'm still going back to school for the master's, but instead I'm supposed to go to seminary.
Oh, wow.
And so I had like a week and a half to get accepted if I wanted to start in the fall to a seminary. And I went to visit a few campuses around the DC area, and Howard University School of Divinity just resonated with me. The minute I stepped on the campus, it felt like a weight was lifted off of me. And I said, this is your place. This is where you're supposed to be. And so I began doing seminary full-time and the Air Force full-time, and got involved in a local parish almost full-time. So I wouldn't recommend doing it that way, but that kept me. That, and I'm not ashamed to admit, I prayed from that point until my 20-year mark where I retired from the Air Force. I simply had one prayer: please don't let me have to do anything that conflicts with my Christian tenets.
All right. You know, you mentioned college. A lot of people meet their spouse at college. Hollis, how did you guys meet?
We met at a church conference.
What's the story?
Well, the story is, and I think she planned it, but I'll tell you.
Because she's the Perry Mason of the
Yes, she was
family.
Perry Mason. I think she planned it. In my ministerial journey, I basically took a year off from studies and had to go in front of the bishop and during our annual conference. And so I was there, had my stuff prepared. She was further along in ministry than I was at the time. And so in our conferences, we have assigned seating. And so the elders sit on one side, and those in diaconate orders, or if you will, in the process, sit on another side. And she completely violated that rule and came up and sat in the pew behind me. And of course, my question was, what are you doing? Why are you here? That was not a good introductory question. Then after lunch, she decided she was going to sit next to me. And that began things. And then we really fell in the introductory part of love when I intentionally tripped her in the pews and caused the dress to fly out.
Oh, wow.
Yes,
Yes.
that was quite an occasion, and me and my classmates had a ball with that.
Oh, man.
And so that's how we began.
So you began by needing to ask forgiveness, and it's been the same ever since.
Every day.
I'm sorry.
Every day.
As I always say, I literally fell in his lap.
Oh,
Playing
wow.
that. He playing that, and I've been falling over him ever since.
Yes, and so
I hope you mean falling over him in a cute way.
In a cute way, yes.
So, you know, we're here at UConn, right? WHUS stores, located on the campus of UConn. I don't know, let's start with you, Carlita. What's your affiliation with UConn?
Well, I'm also a Husky as well. Go Huskies, I know. So after I retired from the Air Force and taught 8th grade for a couple of years, I realized that there was a group of students that I really wanted to reach. These were students that were gang involved. And I knew that they were gifted and talented. And a little rough around the edges, like my mother used to say, diamonds in the rough. But I believed with a little shining and a little polishing, I could get them there, but I couldn't prove it. So I needed to have letters after my name in order to be able to say what I knew deep in my heart. And that was, there are some kids that need a little extra help and that won't look like or act like you think they should, but they're still gifted and talented. That meant I needed a PhD. So UConn, thank you Huskies, made the best offer. And so I sold my house in Maryland. You know, I resigned from teaching in Anne Arundel County, sold my home, and moved up here to the Nutmeg State, cold as it was, and found myself on the campus of UConn Stores, where I did a double major in counseling psychology and education of the gifted and talented. And my specialty area in that was the identification of what I call thrice exceptional, 3 times exceptional children. So these are young people that are gifted, that have at least one diagnosable disability, and are a minority. And that's become the bulk of my consulting work and teaching and interest area now.
So let's, if you don't mind, stick with that for one more second. What exactly are you doing now?
So in addition to teaching, I also mentor, and most recently I've become involved. We've started a consortium of Black scholars, and we're all Black professors in gifted education who have seen the disparities in identifying minority children. Each of us has a sub area. One person might be gifted Black boys, for instance. Mine is gifted minorities with disability. And so we've come together to now train the next group of professors and scholars by publishing together. You know, there's strength in numbers, and doing webinars to get the word out. And we hope that this thing will take off for the next succeeding generations.
It sounds like incredible work. We're getting close to the end of our time. I wanted to get back to you, Hollis, for one more minute. You two came in here together. In what ways do you find that you get to collaborate together, Hollis?
Well, I often like to explain to her that I feel I'm her most difficult case of thrice exceptional individuals.
Okay.
But the ways in which we collaborate in ministry are, it's another Christian word, manifold, several different ways. Number one, I believe myself to be a person who has what I consider mystical tendencies. So I will, in my work, I will deal with matters of prophecy and so on and so forth. And I don't have the same administrative gifts that Reverend Carlita has. And so I'll go on for an hour, and then 5 minutes later, there'll be no indication of what I said. And
So I translated.
Those are some of the ways that we help one another. We complement each other's gifts.
Absolutely.
And I could go on for a whole nother hour for how that works, but I realize that our time is limited.
Well, I do like the way you describe it, though, where it's like, it's almost like some people say, I'm the brains and you're the brawn kind of thing. But in spiritual life, there are different gifts, as we would say. Some might be teachers, some might be prophetic. And so it's nice to see a couple who get what they do and help one another, augment one another. I've had a good time talking to you two. I'm really glad that you came on today. It's the first show since we broke for COVID, so it's very special to have you both here, especially today. And I really had a wonderful time. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you so much.
Everybody, we had a great time talking to Hollis and Carlita Cotton. This is WHUS Stores. I am the Reverend Brian Blair over at St. Mark's Episcopal Chapel on North Eagleville Road here in Stores, and you've been listening to Crossroads.
Down to the crossroads, try to flag a ride. Down to the crossroads, try to flag a ride. Everybody seems to know me, everybody pass me by. Should you know it?
I liked it. Did you?